Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Mad Mamluks podcast. My name is Sim. Along with me is my co-host Sheikh Amir Saeed. How are you all doing? Mahin Islam is out. We had a blizzard and he was not able to make it. We have a wonderful episode for you guys today, but before we get to that, we're going to give a shout out to our sponsors. halfourdeen.com is the website you go for the private matrimonial experience. Go to halfourdeen.com and get your profile set up in as little as 5 minutes. Wahidinvest.com is a website that was created for the purposes of halal investing. Make sure you go to Wahid Invest and download their quick and convenient app and manage your finances. MyWasiya.com is a website that was created by Sheikh Joe Bradford for the purposes of creating a Sharia compliant will that also is recognized by the authorities. MyWasiya.com can make you can get your will created at MyWasiya.com in as little as 15 minutes. All right, thank you for joining us this afternoon. Sorry about the late start. We had some technical issues, but we got it sorted out, and we have Brother William Barylo from the UK. He is of French origin, and he is a sociologist and he's a sociologist, an author, a writer, essentially, and um, uh, you're involved in film as well, right, William?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, yeah. So you have just a plethora of skills, and I don't know how a person like you just figures out, okay, I can do X, Y, and Z, and I need to focus on one of those. Someone who's like a jack of all trades never can really become, uh, or it usually has a hard time bringing all these skills and kind of merging them into a project. Have you been trying to do that, or are you kind of just, you know, doing some drive-bys or, hitting on different topics as they come up?
Well, I would say that I'm driven by my sense of purpose. Like, if I have an idea, I'm always asking myself, how can this idea benefit for the most people? So I have to think not only how could I do things which are relevant to my field, the sociology, but also how can these ideas reach most people. And well, obviously, I started more than 10 years ago with like photography, and I found that visual media, uh, like uh, research, should go together with visual like media, because for obvious reasons, I don't see the point of writing books or articles for them to like take dust in some forgotten shelf in some library. Research has to have practical implication. It has to benefit society. It has to benefit um, people who are also at the being. I don't like this term, like researched upon. This is something like Europeans have been done like for like decades, centuries. But I like to talk rather about making research with people. So anything which is produced by academia has to serve like a community, society first and foremost. And this is, I guess, the logical and natural evolution of my thoughts. So how to illustrate all these complex topics, all these concepts, these like very strange long words that don't maybe mean anything at first sight, but they have to, because it's important, I think, to be able to name things so we can analyze them, know what's going on, and then talk about it in a much more easier way. So I just take it one step at a time. If I'm writing, I'm only focusing on writing. Then if I take the time to reflect on the videos or the visual content, then I'll work on it, and step by step. And it takes some time. It's not easy at all, but
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, this is what I feel is needed to be done.
So, you've had like a, a very interesting selection of places where you want to study. Like, for example, you want to study the Muslims of Poland. Like, what drives you, or what makes you want to study the Muslims of Poland? Because I didn't even know Polish Muslims existed. Um, because there's so much haram food in Poland. They like a lot of pork, you know? So, well, at least that's what our perception is, or of it, William. So, tell us a little bit about that.
And
How
not only
you.
that, just to add to that, a lot of people when they talk about the Muslim world, they really don't talk about Muslims in Poland. Unfortunately, they either talk about the Muslims in UK, Muslims in France, Muslims in
Right.
Brussels, Muslims in America, Muslims in
Well,
Australia. No one really talks about
that's
Muslims in Poland.
an amazing point because I didn't even. This is the first time I met someone of a French origin, white French origin person who is Muslim as well. So people, at least from the English-speaking
Yeah.
Muslim world, the UK, Canada, Australia, we haven't seen many of you guys. So tell us a little bit about that, William. At least your background and your selection process on how you end up picking
Muslims of
places to,
Poland.
yeah, Muslims of Poland to study. You know.
Yeah. So first of all, just there is a place on the globe which hasn't been touched by Islam. So I think haram food or not, like any places in the world, you can find Muslims, and even if it might seem unexpected. So about my research process, I think it's pretty straightforward. I was born in France, but my parents are Polish, and so they flew from Poland. They escaped communism in the 80s. Then they settled in France. They came like for a very modest background. Like my dad, his parents. My granddad used to work in construction in this city of Poland called Piekareszanskie near Katowice and Silesia. So a very industrial region. My mom, her parents were farmers. She grown up in a village, and so they had to flee uh, Poland in the 80s. And then I was born in France. My sister was born in France, and complex fearing because at the time in the 80s there was like a heavy and serious anti-Polish propaganda in France, and because the like I've learned about it during my studies in my masters that Polish immigration in France back in the days, they didn't like Polish people because they found they were too religious. And even if that's not true for like all the people who came to France, but well, my parents wanted me and my sister to completely assimilate to
The French.
give us English sounding names. So my name is like, it was not like a Mariusz or Tomek. It's a William, because they wanted me to blend. They didn't teach us Polish because they wanted us to only speak French. And well, they realized later that they made kind of a mistake because we were learning French at school anyways. And we asked them, my sister and I, for them to speak Polish with us so we can like get back to our roots. And when I embraced Islam, which was more than 10 years ago, so I still have family in Poland. Like I have an uncle, a few cousins, and back in the days, my grandma on my mom's side was still alive, and I wanted to see her because I think it was the grandma which was like closest to me. But after I embraced Islam, of course, I was asking myself the question: so, where will I be able to pray Jummah if there was any place like this? Where will I be able to uh, find food if I needed to eat on my own? And then, naturally, as anyone else would do, I Googled Muslims, Islam, Poland. And that, my own surprise, I found that you have Muslims families settled since the 14th century in Poland. So it came as a surprise because they are still like 0.01% of the whole population. But I just like found that Poland has this immense history where Muslims were actually an officially recognized minority when it comes to the Tatars. These are the original Muslims who came from Crimea and Turkey, from And so there were officers serving the Duke of Poland, Litvia, at the time to defend the country against like the Germans. And as a reward, as an act of gratitude, the Duke granted all the Tatar officers a piece of land and the right to practice their own religion. So you can still find nowadays in the northern parts of the country mosques which are built entirely of wood and which are 200, 300 years old. So there's a massive heritage over there.
That's amazing. So, what kind of population would you put Muslims in Poland at? I mean, are they under 1 million, or maybe much more less than that?
When I did my documentary, which you can find is freely accessible on YouTube, I think I stumbled upon the figures of maximum 40,000 people in a country which has 40 million inhabitants.
And what's the name of your documentary? Sorry.
On YouTube, you just type Polish Muslims documentary, and it will come up on the results.
Very cool.
So yeah, it's very small and also very diverse, because of course Poland has entered the European Union in 2005. So not only you have have become like a minority within the minority, but also you have lots of people who came from Turkey, North Africa, South Asia, the Middle East, and of course lots of Poles, Polish men and women, and mostly women embracing Islam in Poland.
And generally, like if you meet with some Bosnians or Albanians, a lot of them find similarities, or they kind of look up to the Turks. Right, and some of them may be able to speak some Turkish. I met some Albanians that know how to speak a little bit of Turkish. Is that the same thing with the Polish Muslims? Do they kind of find similarities with the Turkish Muslims?
Well, the Tatars, they had a huge Turkish influence, of course.
Yes.
But now, because
now in 2019.
Now in 2019, I would say. And also one thing to take into account is that during the communism era, the practice of religion had declined. The religiosity, they had to take like Christian sounding names. For example, someone called Ali, he would have a second name, Alexander.
Yeah.
And for example, but nowadays, so you have a very diverse population of Muslims in Poland. So it's not only the Tatars, but you have also lots of people who come from all these different parts of the world, who have like all sorts of different influences. So I would say it's not monolithic at all.
Okay.
Well, William, you kind of got on our map when you were talking about neoliberalism, and you kind of made a video related to that, and I'm going to put that on in a minute. But we've had a difficult time explaining some of these very difficult concepts, as you mentioned earlier. You know, making something that sounds scary, like neoliberalism
and
modernity, and all these, you know, various political philosophical words like postmodernism as well. You know, having that make sense to the listeners has been quite a challenge, and we've done our best. But I think what you did was kind of nailed it. You created a video that kind of exemplifies what neoliberal, or one of the tenets, one of the effects of how neoliberalism has crept into into the Muslim world as well. So I'm going to go ahead and show the viewers a little bit about what your video is about. I'm not going to play the whole thing because it's a little bit lengthy, but we can go ahead and watch it and get a little bit of a taste of what it's about.
Assalamu alaikum. Do you want to make £62,311 and 32 pence within 1 hour doing absolutely nothing?
Why is it a problem to define the idea of success in terms of performance, results or money? Why do the most popular celebrities all share the same lifestyle, which is about fast cars, bragging about the Emirates first class seats, and they all go to Dubai?
Dubai right here. This is Dubai right here.
You see all those skyscrapers.
They vehiculated the idea that to be be Muslim, one needs to be cool. And to be cool is to appear powerful and desirable. Hello and welcome. I'm William, and this is Q, a series for exploring social challenges. And today we will analyze neoliberalism, where it comes from, and why it's problematic. Part of the answer.
All right, so the viewers just got a little taste of what the video is about. I'm going to put a link in the description below so that they can see the entirety of the video. Now, what is neoliberalism?
So to make it very, very simple, it started in the late 40s, early 50s, some people would say even earlier, as an economic system, just like capitalism. However, the thing with neoliberalism is that it has become an economic system which has become an entire culture, I would say even a cult, or maybe a religion to some extent. So basically, the economic system itself is very simple. It's free market, so no regulations and making money out of like anything and everything. And with the assumption that the prices will be regulated by competition. So what if we translate this into a way of life? How does it translate? Basically, someone who lives as a neoliberal, this is the philosophy that you have to live your life like as if you were in a market, like thinking of things as potential products you can make profit of, and like consequently, anything you can make potentially money out of like anything and everything, and of course see your life as a competition. You have to crush your competitors.
So you assign values to every single person you see. Like even if I see a person that is making another podcast and possibly see him as a competitor instead of a human being who's trying to do whatever he can. Same here. If he's following the neoliberal philosophy, might not necessarily see a dollar value on him, but might see him as a competitor. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's seeing the world from the lens of utilitarianism. How can this person or this object serve me? How can I make use of this person, of this object? And so it has for like, let's say 60, 70 years, and to the point that it has become in some societies, let's say like Europe and certainly America, North America, that to be a valid citizen you need to be someone who earns, who produces, and who consumes. So, and this is how we come to this end where we have people like shaming poor people, saying that they're not working as hard and this and so on, because everything has to be looked through the lens of productivity, of performance, of success. Actually, why is success has been so defined by our material possessions and our social status? Why success should be linked to how much power you have, how big is your house, how powerful or expensive is your car, what profession are you doing? Why is it better to be why do people?
William, you got cut off. We can't hear you.
That's a long gap. You have to re-explain for 15 seconds.
Oh my Lord.
Oh, we can hear you now.
Oh, we can hear you. Yes.
Perfect.
Okay. Go ahead. He was saying, why do people?
About the notion of success.
Yes.
Yes. So why has it become to a point that success is identified by like how much do you earn, how big is your house, how expensive is your car, what is your profession? Why is it better to be a banker than, for example, let's say an artist or a teacher or a nurse? So basically it's like strongly associated with your social status. And if you want to have like a good social status according to neoliberalism, then you have to be either wealthy, famous, powerful. Yeah, it's about basically your power of influence to some extent.
Now, a lot of people will say, well, there's been a lot of good that has happened because of, very famous people who um, may have utilized some neoliberal ideas. Like, for example, Noman Ali Khan. He's got a very large audience. He basically mastered the way the Christian evangelicals held their conferences and stuff, and he's built a very large audience. Now, people will say, William Barylo, you know what? So what if neoliberalism brought these ideas? It's brought a tremendous amount of other people to the faith, and we're benefiting from these ideas instead of
But not only
hurting.
that, just to add on to that, people say, well, we're living in a time of neoliberalism, materialism. Why not use and throw Islam on that same wavelength and make it, readily available for everyone else, like everything else, or else we're going to be left behind as da'is or whatever the case is, right? So how would you respond to those two, sir?
Yeah, so of course, like neoliberalism comes with some effects that people might see as like useful, interesting, like having more visibility, having more, and people would justify, for example, yeah, this is for empowering the Ummah and this kind of things. But however, my contention is that neoliberalism is nothing more than a lie. It's an illusion that we are being sold. And I insist that the term sold, yeah, we are being sold and bought. So, because I would say very similarly to a religion, whereas in Islam, so we are told that, yeah, if we do behave like this, we do this and do that, so we can either go to Jannat or Jahannam, so hell or heaven. But like neoliberalism, offers a similar, I would say, theology in the sense that it tells us that if we want to be free, if we want to be happy, then we need to become rich, we need to become famous, we need to become powerful. However, there is a catch. Of course, it doesn't come for free. So the first thing is, if people climb the ladder, of course, there is a cost, because people are implicitly told to they have to conform to the dominant society. Especially, I'm talking like about like us Muslims here, especially here in where we are in the minority. We have to sacrifice parts of our culture, our identity, our ethics, our values, our faiths, our beliefs. Just for example, why people for applying for jobs, like lots of people would change their names on the CV for having more like English sounding names. Why on the workplace I see people instead of presenting themselves as Rizvan, they will call them Riz. Instead of Muhammad, it's Mo. It's all because of all these external pressures. If you don't conform to a certain like behavior, looks, thoughts, the second contention,
Oh.
all about.
Sorry.
You're getting cut off again.
You got cut off from
Oh.
where you said looks and behaviors and.
Yeah, so yeah, that was the end of my point, and I was about to switch to my second contention, which is once you reach the very top, it's all about replicating the same systems of injustices and oppression.
Yeah.
For example,
go ahead.
Yeah, for example, what if one day we have a Muslim president of the United States? That would be wonderful. Like all the papers would be like would be all cheering on social media. Yeah, that would be really really good news. We had Obama like a first black president, so why not like a Muslim president of the United States? But then, what would be the point of having a Muslim president of the United States if this president goes and bombs civilians?
Right.
And the same thing, for example, if we have like a Muslim CEO of, let's say, for example, Virgin. Here in the UK, there's a huge problem with the public health care, which is being privatized by Virgin. So what if we have a Muslim Richard Branson? What would be the point of Islam if this person is tied because he would have to listen to the shareholders telling him that he needs to privatize the public health care? And so and then we have all this narrative that we need to become the elite to be free to end Islamophobia and oppression, to the point that in my observations recently I come across this phenomenon of Muslim elite clubs where it's on invite only, and you have to pay between 1,000 and 2,000 depending on the club, to let's say dollars or pounds, to have the privilege, but a privilege between courts, to meet with the richest, the most famous Muslims or like celebrities. For example, you get to talk with Hillary Clinton or the CEO of Amazon, and yeah, this is a true phenomenon. And
Uh,
but yeah,
no, William, I was interested in your take regarding the recent controversial advertisement related to Gillette. Have you heard about this?
yeah. I
Okay.
have seen the
So
idea.
for those who haven't heard, the Gillette advertisement was, talking about being virtuous men and being um, putting an end to toxic masculinity. Is there a correlation we can make with regards to how Gillette utilized toxic masculinity to further their message and, to enhance their brand and kind of social engineer people to get to talk about their commercial and as well, do you see a correlation there or no?
Yeah, completely. I mean, the thing is, I think most people got it right when they spotted that Gillette doing all of a sudden an ad about toxic masculinity and so on. So I think people got it right when they like immediately uh, noticed that, yeah, it's a company, a neoliberal company trying to tap into another market with trying to change its brand image. So it's all about, images the companies display and the words they're using. For example, let's just talk about like the words people use nowadays on social media to promote products. We are talking about influencers, which are in fact like marketers, advertisers, but we prefer to call them influencers. We call people explorers, whereas like the only thing they are is like individual tourists. And again, this we have hijacked words like, for example, the coolness. If we read books like this, maybe you heard about Muslim cool from Suad Abdul Khabir. So she says how cool was first in like coined by black Muslim Americans about being proud of themselves, self-love, being unapologetic and confident about who they are. But now being cool is, yes, someone who goes into like 5-star
We lost you at 5 star.
resorts in Bali, like anything that
5-star resorts, yeah.
like locates you close to centers of power, like wealth, fame, and so on. And yeah, and one final note about this, like a very subtle tweak of words. Nowadays, people we the community, they are pushing each other to become leaders. But again, my contention is, do we even have this concept of leadership in our tradition? Because when we think of a leader, who do we think of? It's this like sole person, usually male, like the president of the United States, a general in the army, or a CEO who is just crushing competitors and using his strength, his power, his intelligence to solve problems by force and getting all the merits by himself. But if we look at our Sunnah, at the life of the Prophet ﷺ, we remember the names of the companions, we remember the names of the wives. He was never alone. He would take decisions by consultation. Of course, he was a warrior. He had to defend the community through wars, but he had this amazing soft power, able to turn enemies into solid allies and friends. And this we completely forget, because in Islam we have this notion of khalifa, being a caliph. And what is a caliph? Is someone who is a steward. It's not someone who dominates. It's someone who takes care of the people around him. And I think we have lost this like differentiation. And I think we would really win at like remembering like what our tradition would say about like leadership and influence and power.
So So in terms of unwinding the effect of neoliberalism, is it even possible? Because it seems like the most logical way for a business to operate is utilizing all the vehicles that society is offering it. Now, without Islam as a guiding principle, what other way would businesses or any other enterprise operate? You understand what I'm saying, William?
Because
Like how?
contemporary
Yeah,
thought is based off of everything that we have, which is neoliberalism. So how would they progress without using that vehicle itself of neoliberalism, right?
right. So because you can't unwind this because they've already progressed to this mode of thinking where you assign values to everything, and everything is 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 uh, is going to be a dollar value. How do you come back from that?
I'm not sure that there is a solution as simple as coming back, but I trust that people will soon realize that the dangers and also the consequences it has, because you cannot like turn 1.6 billion of believers into 1.6 billion of consumers all of a sudden without consequences. And also this narrative that to be accepted in the society, we need to be economic actors and nothing else. Because it has like dire serious consequences of, for example, mental health. You are supposed to be someone in the workplace, at school, at university, and then but you are like someone completely different. And let me take this very important example in marriage and relationships, because why has it become so hard to find a partner nowadays? It's because we have embraced all the expectations that the dominant society like imposes on us. And people, even if they're Muslim, they would reject people for like all sorts of random reasons. Like I have a friend, like you know why he was rejected? It's just mad. Let me tell you, actually, it's a very short story. So I have a dear friend, and he is like a psychologist working for public healthcare, and he was once talking with someone for the purpose of marriage. And finally, he gets invited at the parents' house. And so he's from Indian background, the family is from Indian background. And then when he enters the house, and the dad, like he's professor in genetics. So you expect like top-notch scientific knowledge, like someone who is able to think critically, top-notch etiquette. But then when my friend enters the house, the dad, even before saying salam alaikum, the first thing he asked my friend, are you Pakistani? I don't want my daughter to marry a Pakistani. So my friend, he says, cool, calm down. My parents are Indian and so on and so on. But it doesn't end here. The dad looks out of the window. He looks back at my friend. Then all of a sudden he says, get out now. So you can imagine my friend like gets really, really confused, not knowing like we haven't even started. What is happening? And the dad then says, I don't want my daughter to marry someone who's got less than a Mercedes. And my friend has had a Vauxhall. I mean, I guess in America it would be the equivalent of a Ford or like a low quality car. And yeah, and this is just like horrible. Why have we put this kind of expectation and standards in the community? And so what if our parents, like even if I think of my own parents, they pushed me and my sister to become like bankers, engineers, because I understand they came to France with like no money, and they wanted, for them, they were believing that yeah, money and wealth and good income would be synonym of security, safety, stability. But then the question is, what if we don't want to be rich or to do these professions? What if we don't believe that we will be happy doing these or becoming rich? What even we have experienced in our own lives that no money or this kind of like high earning profession doesn't equate like happiness? And this is why I guess we have such an epidemic of mental health in the community. I see people ending up in relationships with people they have chosen because of their looks, because of their income, and they end up completely depressed. They are arguing each day, and like even some of my friends, one marriage, they're thinking of suicide sometimes. And like, what kind of society is like which like pushes people like to think about killing themselves? And I think there's a real problem, and people at some point they will realize it and notice that yeah, there's something wrong with like how the system works.
Well, the whole idea is that it seems like everyone is being pushed to chase their next instinct. The the more you satisfy whatever is your next inclination towards anything, whether it's partying or whether it's sex or whether it's um, vacations or whatever it is, but you are essentially becoming a slave to your desires.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think this is something that's getting lost on people when we talk about these concepts, William. That people don't understand. Like, well, what other way is there to live? This is happiness, and they look at you like you're an alien, and you're talking about something that is alien to what makes you a human being. That that what makes humans uh, achieve happiness is pursuing the next pleasure. So, can you talk a little bit about that and how we come back from that and how we restructure our brains so that we find happiness in another means, through another means?
Well, it's a very, very complex question because I don't think there is a single way to do this. But the things you mentioned about like seeking pleasure and like like immediate fulfillment were like this kind of rush of dopamine to the brain. I think it comes with time and people and self-reflection. Because if I reflect on my own journey, like at some point I was believing what my parents would tell me, that yeah, I need to become rich, I need to become this and this, so maybe I'll be happy, and like, and I was like feeling that every step I would take for to validate their dream would make me actually happy. But when people start facing hardships, going through hard times, like whether it can be things like illness, separation, like or like depression, we have lack of self-esteem. I think people naturally realize the only like the my only, I would say, uh, thing that makes me sad is that people sometimes realize it when they're reaching 40, their 40s, their 50s. And I wish these are things we could teach our own children, and for the future generation, for like when I have children, inshallah, is for them, I want them to be awaits them on the path, what people would say, what the society will say, and for them to be very cautious and careful not to fall into the same traps I've been falling into. And I think it has
Yeah.
to do with the importance of storytelling within our families. Like, did my parents even told me once about like the hardships I would be facing at university, at school, or even like in relationships? I wish they would have told me the mistakes they made, and for me to be careful not to replicate the same mistakes. But I found this like dimension of storytelling like almost non-existent. It's like there is a taboo with certain things, and they just let me learn with trial and error, unfortunately. But I think, yeah, this is something which we need to think about. How do we transmit our experiences to the next generation?
And I'm glad you mentioned storytelling. I think that's a really awesome buzzword. Storytelling is, I think, one of the most profound and the simplest way to bring about change. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. Like we say, I've heard some people say before, well, we have to let children live and experience life. That's the first thing. And eventually they'll come to us for help. That's one mindset, right? The other is, what you're mentioning, you wish that someone told you what you should expect. Reason being is we think that if our children aren't living in the the contemporary setting that we're in right now, we're talking about neoliberalism, and we think that our children are going to be left out. That's the biggest problem. We're worried about our children being outcasts and then being bullied. But the thing is that the beautiful thing about storytelling is that when you tell somebody a story by way of learning lessons through it, you're allowing them to understand that you may be subjugated to being an outcast, you may be subjugated to some type of bullying, but the story built a very strong foundation within them, which they understand why they're going through it now. If you don't go by way of storytelling, I mean, look at the Mecca. One of the reasons for the themes of Mecca of the revelation of the Quran was stories of the prophets to Muhammad sallallahu that came before, right? We know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the thematically focused on aqidah, belief, everything that entails belief. Also focused on not tipping the scales, changing certain habits they had, like burying the daughters, but also a big portion of that was giving elaborate stories, right, to Muhammad sallallahu to strengthen his resolve, because stories are going to be something that they stick with you, and they actually have a profound way of building concepts within you without intentionally building concepts, right? They build concepts within an individual, and they make them very strong, and they're able to withstand any type of hardship, whether it be social, emotional, physical, because it's those stories. And that's what Allah look at Surah Yusuf. It's the entire story of Yusuf alayhi salam from beginning to end. A lot of surahs, when they include stories of the prophets, it'll be like a portion here, a portion there, and that's because, and when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls it the best of stories, it means that we're going to learn the best of lessons, and it'll strengthen us the most if we look at it properly, the way it's supposed to be looked at, right? So when you said storytelling, I think that's something that's so underutilized. Everyone loves hearing stories. Everyone loves stories.
Yeah, what you say is extremely, extremely important, because going back to neoliberalism, one of the contentions I have is, what role models do we take nowadays?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I hear so many people saying things such as, oh, we need a Muslim Mark Zuckerberg, we need a Muslim Richard Branson, oh, we need a Muslim Rupert Murdoch. I'm tempted to tell them, man, do you know who is Rupert Murdoch? One of them.
And we have those, by the way. They just don't know those names. We have people like Walid bin Talal and them, and they're part of the machine.
Yeah.
And my point is, why don't we say, oh, we need a British or an American Al-Ghazali, a British Ibn Sina, a British Malcolm X, or an American Rabia Al-Adawiya? And why don't we look at the very sirah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he used to struggle. He had so many different struggles that he overcame in many different ways, and we have so much to learn about this. And there is alhamdulillah, I want to I praise the elders for transmitting all the rituals, for giving us the ability to read the Quran, even if we don't really understand Arabic. But I think now we also need to put more focus on adab and etiquette, because even if we take the story of the revelation chronologically, first, there was not the prayer. It didn't come immediately. There was not zakat, no fasting. First, after the oneness of God, it was good behavior and taking care of the vulnerable in the community. And I think this is also something which got lost, because neoliberalism, again, if it works together with racism, with Islamophobia, white supremacy, and all these things, all dominant systems, basically, they work in parallel. And as a consequence, I think one of the things that make me really sad is that we are losing the ability to listen to pain, to vulnerability, to suffering, and except, of course, if it's marketed and commoditized in the right way, there will always be these kind of things. But I just mean about people around us. For example, just last night I was chairing a panel about masculinity versus prophetic.
Masculinity versus what?
Hyper masculinity versus prophetic masculinity. And in this kind of events, you have people who come with a lot of trauma, and it's same though events around for example, being black and Muslim in the West. People, the problem is the dominant society wants us to deny the trauma of others and makes us completely blind to their suffering. So we just stay in our corner looking at our own selves. But actually, if we look at the story of the Revelation, this is exactly what what the Prophet did. When he the poor people who were slaves, he fought for them and spreading the message of Islam, which was a message of yeah, first being like compassionate. There's a reason why when the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the very first which come at every prayer is Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, like most merciful, most compassionate. I think there is a reason for that, and I think it's also one of our biggest strengths for us not to forget that, yeah, we have people suffering around, and that this society is designed for us to be blind to all these things, for us to be comfortable, consume, produce, forget about the others, take care of your own self, be rich, be famous, and you'll be eventually happy. But it doesn't tell us that the happiness of our own selves cannot be dissociated from the happiness and the well-being and the safety of all of us around in the community.
No, I mean, well, the if you think about the effect of neoliberalism and how it's really played into human psychology, I mean, let's just look at the sampling of the Western countries. It has created the Western countries. We can easily say that in terms of history, they are the most richest countries in the history of man. In terms of the availability to food, shelter, water, and resources, heat, our basic needs. But it has made people or manipulated people into thinking that they are poor and they are miserable, and without certain things being met in their life, they have not accomplished anything, and that they should be miserable. So they've kind of created a false construct of what happiness is, and then tried to make them achieve that. And I think if you look at least the history of how humans operated, it seems like humans were just content or happy with the food that they were able to gather, and having shelter and not having war. And now it's become all these things that you need to have. At least from the video that you saw,
Consumption and materialism.
you saw all these Muslim personalities from YouTube showing off their nice cars, showing off their money, showing off their all the wealth that they've acquired, and trying to tell you, like, in order for you to be successful, and they've defined success with those measurements, and they've said, in order for you to be successful, this is what you need.
And it shows them all laughing loud and smiling.
Smiling, having a
as
good
if they're
time.
living in a
you know,
very ecstatic state. Yeah.
They're in luxury airplanes and things like that, and they're essentially poisoning the mind. And I'm not saying they're horrible people and they're doing it intentionally. They're part of the machine. They've just and to some extent maybe we are as well. But how? I guess what we want to understand now is, how do we move forward, and how do we start reaching this contentment? Maybe is it working out? Is it are we? How do we get our dopamine in a healthy way rather than these temporary fixes?
Yes.
Yeah, very, very important. So, but just before that, I just want to touch upon what you just mentioned, which is, I think, also very important to remember about all these like celebrities and all we see on social media, because sometimes, of course, they are agents of a system of oppression, which I don't agree with, but at the same time, I feel for them because they are also victims. Because I mean, it's understandable, because if we are in a community which has been like which is completely being oppressed with the media, politicians, it's understandable. It's a human trait to seek for validation and acceptance. And the only problem is, again, like we have come to the point where here in the UK, I don't know if you heard about the prevent strategy,
Right.
basically, reporting.
We have CVE over here, countering violent extremism. Go ahead, please explain.
Yeah, the problem is we have like fellow Muslims not ashamed of like reporting other Muslims to prevent for them to show that, yeah, I can be more British than the British. Same in France, we have all these like laws against the hijab, like in religious signs, and sometimes people who are like really within the Muslim community, or people from a Muslim background, they get upset because they see a skirt which is too long and they would report it. And so as I somehow understand where it comes from. But as you said this, it makes me think, of this guy in the Matrix who stays in the Matrix because he loves so much the taste of the steak.
Yeah.
So he will make a deal with the agent. No, I'm staying. It's and he, of course, and we see him like killing others. So, but yeah, very rightful. I think the question is like, we know what's going on. We know what's
No,
and then how do
but
we go from this? Yep.
well, but you just made a profound statement about the man who enjoyed the steak in the Matrix, and he's like, this is real. This is what is making me happy, and I think there's many people who are aware of what they have become, but they're just like, you know what, I'm enjoying this right now. I'm willfully. They're making a cognizant choice to kind of stay in this matrix.
Yes, and actually, yeah, because I've interviewed people who are making a living out of YouTube or Instagram, and the problem is they are aware they're caught in a trap, a game of numbers, because they don't like it, taking pictures of their food, like making Insta stories about their day, but they told me that they have to do it because otherwise they will lose followers, and if they lose followers, so the brands will not be interested in making it like a deal partnership with them. And some of the people they are like single mothers, people who are really struggling with money, and unfortunately it has become their only option because it's been just so hard to find jobs outside of social media. But yeah, but back to your question of what can we do, what would be the further steps, and I would like for this to recall like one of my favorite thinkers ever. Her name is Bell Hooks, and she talks about margins as spaces of infinite possibilities. And it made completely sense to me because like she basically there's this opposition like a center and margins, and we as a minority of Muslims and we are in the margin, but we have in she there's a lots of hope in her writings because this is actually where anything and everything can happen, even if we don't have the means, because
Wait,
we
that's
have
actually.
lots of
I'm sorry. I want to pause you there for 1 second.
yeah.
So, would you? Is it? Am I understanding this properly? You're saying so. If when you say margins, you mean if there's a part of human society that's marginalized, that
Yeah.
very marginalization is room for lots of growth, and it can become something very beautiful, right?
Exactly, because if we think about what do we have, even if the thing is we are trapped into thinking that what do we have can only be defined but if you can put it into numbers. But actually, can you put numbers on like friendship, love, patience, forgiveness, hope, dreams, faith, spirituality? Of all these things you cannot put numbers on, have no value in the dominant society. But of course we are being lied, so we forget that we have all these things. We can create, we can do lots of things. And actually, if we look at how the revelation began and how Islam spread, it was not like through like a big marketing campaign. Was someone who was already like a charismatic. There were lots of followers. It started very very small. The first person he told about, like it was his wife, and it was like his nephews, close friends, close relatives, and people who were like not necessarily very privileged. At the time, it started very very small, and then it grew bigger and bigger and bigger till like people in Makkah, the Quraysh, they couldn't stand it, so they had to even flee to migrate to Medina. So the first years were very very dire, but still now we see like how Islam has spread all over the globe. So even if it starts very small, even if it takes a long time, I think there's a lesson here that it's okay not to be necessarily rich, famous and powerful, because we have some other things that maybe some other people don't value at all. And maybe we are too much focused on the instant, like making instant impact, making an instant like deal, getting like instantly lots of attention. But if we have a look at even our own tradition, or even if we look at like figures like Malcolm X, it all started very small. It took a number of years. Some people, they even like have to die before getting any recognition or for us recognizing that, yes, they impacted history, they left a huge legacy. But yeah, I think it takes lots of patience, and we are not trained, we are not like taught to think in the long term. And I think this is, yeah, a big problem nowadays.
I think, just everything we're talking about right now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very, very clear in Surah Al-Hadid, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّمَا الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيا, where Allah starts the verse off with, know that, the life of this world. And he doesn't say inna, he doesn't start off with something indeed, he says wa'alamu. And that lets us and leads us to believe that this is a knowledge that people will be forgotten, or something you have to teach people over and over. That this world is nothing but play, it's lahu, right? It's something that is just about a certain type of accumulation. And it's tafakhurun bainakum. It's all about boasting and bragging, right? And watakathurun, and just accumulating lots and lots, and having lots of children. Because back then, the more children you had, like Walid ibn Mughira, for instance, I think he had 10 or 11 boys, and he used to walk wherever he went as if he's walking with an army. It's like his own little tribe amongst his tribe, and that was a sign of arrogance, right? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in that very verse, it's such a simple, it's everything we've been talking about right now. So Allah talks about the life of this world is just a small play, and it's all about boasting, it's all about accumulating and showing people what you have. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, it's like those tillers, that grow something, and they're very pleased by what they have in front of them. But then eventually it starts becoming yellow. Because what happens to plants when they're really nice and green? When they start dying, one of the signs is what? They start turning yellow. And then it becomes debris. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then, at the last third of the verse, if you divide the verse into 3 parts, then he talks about, and the akhirah, there's a severe punishment in the akhirah and forgiveness. That's why this verse is so beautiful, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about, in the akhirah, there's a torment and there's maghfirah. Right after the other. So it's like a choice you have to make. And just like there's lots of growth that you see that may be green, it's going to become yellow also. And this world that you're living, that's in a very beautiful place, you can make it beautiful and very nice, but you can also make this beautiful place very toxic and make it all about boasting and accumulating. That becomes a very toxic spiral. That's a downward
People
spiral.
end up spending large parts of their lives. I know when I was like in my early 20s, I spent so much time comparing myself to a brother that this one sister I wanted to marry, and she ended up marrying him, and he was very successful. So I ended up wasting years of my life just comparing myself. Even though I'm married, I have a wife, kids, and everything. I'm measuring my metric of success is placed with him.
That's how powerful that is, man.
You
Even
know?
after you're done, you have your own life and everything.
And I'm still miserable.
It's lingering. It's like, you mean still right now?
No, I'm just back then.
Oh, okay. Alhamdulillah. I was about to say, after the show, we got to talk, brother. You should be happy. But no, but that's how the thing about looking in the mirror and not be happy with yourself.
Yeah.
That's a scary thing. People don't like to look at themselves because they're constantly comparing themselves to other people. And we, as human beings, are very good at putting up shells and fronts. And you as a sociologist, Brother William, you can expand upon this. I'm by no means a sociologist or psychologist, but this is your arena here. But there's something very, very scary about an individual who lives their whole life with themselves. And they look into the mirror and they're able to be miserable to the point where I've met people that don't like looking in the mirror anymore.
Yeah.
Right? And obviously there's psychological reasons for that too, but some of that has to do with comparing yourself to other people and not living up to that standard. And we're in front of other people, we could put up a shell and act like we're happy, but deep down we have this unfortunate, portion of the human experience where we're miserable inside, but we can smile in front of people, right? And we want to be able to look in the mirror, and smile. Like the hadith of Rasulullah, when you look in the mirror, you look at it and say, Ya Allah, you beautified me and beautified my actions the same way, right?
Yeah.
It all comes back to Allah and what you've done for your Creator, right?
Yeah.
Oh Allah, the dua is beautiful. You know, you look in the mirror, you think, you know, Ya Allah, the way you've created me beautiful, beautify my actions. Other people are not involved in this. It's all about Allah, right? What is Allah thinking of me? What is how if Allah was to take my life right now, how would I meet Allah? At that moment, nothing matters after that. People don't matter. None of that matters, right? So, and I think that's something. It's very simple. It's very elementary, and when we say we have to go back to the Quran and Sunnah, I think this is what we mean, right? We have to look at the verses. You're not going to know about the verses if you don't read the verses, right? We're not going to know about the Hadith of Rasulullah about the self and how beautiful we actually are as human beings, no matter what other people think, right? It's all about our actions with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But, you know, if you can, I know we've talked about that, but that this whole concept of us being able to be happy in front of other people, miserable inside, Brother William, is there something you could expand upon that just to give us a little bit of enlightenment, please?
Yeah, I mean, it happens to me too. It's been happening to me actually. I was aware of it like maybe earlier than I thought, like for the past like 5, 10 years. And I think it's completely normal because we have to think about this society is built upon the production of pain and so we are seeking validation. We are comparing us to whoever is in power, whoever is celebrated, who is given a platform under these expectations. So, and actually on that, maybe you've read like recent articles where even the people at the very the founders of Facebook, where at the very beginning they admitted that they have designed social media for us to feel inadequate and seek validation. Like the person who designed the like button on Facebook, there you can Google it. He like openly talks about this, but now he regrets it. And so what are we experiences is completely normal. But again, I think it's important to also find out not only the roots of why it doesn't work, but then also to this is why the society pushes us and to do this and to feel like this. But then what do we do against this? And I think now the most important questions is now, because there's a growing scholarship on all these like system which are completely colonial in a sense, like imposing on us things so we can like erase our like history, culture, identity. So let's call them as it is. But then how do we heal from this? How do we rebuild? How do we build our self-esteem? How do we become confident in our skills, in our knowledge? Because like as Bell Hooks says, like margins, space of infinite possibilities. We have people in the community, mashallah, they have the skills, they have the knowledge, they are like, capable of like everything, but we just need to I think there's lots of things to be rebuilt because we've been wounded, like and not even just us, but it's been going on for decades, for centuries. So how do we heal from them? Then how do we grow, and how do we eventually write our own stories, imagine hopeful futures? And this is why I think arts are extremely important, and I'm really happy we have so many different artists in the community, because they allow us to imagine like a better word, to put like words or images not only on the wounds but also on our hopes and our dreams. And eventually, like, we need to also to leave a legacy for later. Think about the like further generations. It's not only about us again. So I think these are crucial questions to ask ourselves, so we can be free from all these like chains.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Brother William, as we wrap things up, what's next on your plate? What's your next project? And
What you got going?
Are you coming to the States anytime soon?
I would like to.
I've noticed you've done some stuff with Zaytuna before.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've given a talk at Zaytuna College, and I've been participating in the Islamophobia conference back in the days in Berkeley, and so now I have like friends there in the US, so it's very likely I'll come back
You got cut off. Very likely you got.
Yeah. So I was asking you, are you based in Chicago?
Yes, we are based out of Chicago.
Yeah, I've never visited Chicago before, so maybe it will be the opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Inshallah.
But at the moment, basically, I'm just busy with my own research project, which is called The Diaspora Strikes Back, as a researcher at Warwick University.
The
Wait,
So,
diaspora.
wait. The diaspora strikes back.
yeah, the
Okay.
Diaspora Strikes Back,
Mm.
because we're living in a world of empires. So, yeah, now it's time Diaspora Strikes Back. I mean, it's been striking back for a long, long time, but I
For those
want
who
to
don't know,
put
what
in
does
past.
diaspora mean? For those who don't know.
Yeah, so when I'm talking about diaspora and especially the Muslim diaspora, it's basically all of us Muslims all over the globe. It's because diaspora means that we are far from our spiritual, cultural points of origins, and so we have spread all over the globe. So basically, diaspora is a way of saying this. Of course, I'm very simplifying a lot, but yeah, this is the rough idea. So yeah, working on this project and focusing on grassroots initiatives, artists, young academics, activists, community leaders in the UK and in France, and how do they find ways of, as was saying, how do they find ways for healing, for glowing, flourishing, and eventually like writing their own stories.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time this evening. Please stay on
Thanks
the
to you.
line after I end this show. Let me give a quick shout out to our sponsors. halfhourdean.com is a website you go for the private matrimonial experience. Go to halfhourdean.com and get your profile made in as little as 5 minutes. wahidinvest.com is a website that is dedicated to Sharia halal investing. Go to Wahid Invest and download their app that will allow you to manage your investments very quickly and painlessly. MyWasiya.com is a website that will be allowing you to create a Sharia compliant will in as little as 15 minutes. Go to MyWasiya.com and we have a special link for MyWasiya in the description that will allow you to save some money. That being said, for my co-host Sheikh Amir and our guest William Barylo, my name is Sim. Thank you very much for joining us this Saturday afternoon. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, yo.